Did you know that sacred objects directly linked to Jesus Christ were found and silenced by the Vatican? For centuries, mysterious stories, hidden documents, and sacred relics remained hidden within the Vatican's secret archives, far from the public eye, far from the truth so many seek. But why were these discoveries, so important to the history of Christianity, never revealed? What lies behind these sacred walls that the Church fears the world will discover? This video will take you on a dark journey behind the scenes of faith, revealing Vatican secrets that have been hidden for centuries. We're not talking about legends or myths. We're talking about real sacred objects, possibly linked to Cross of Christ, to the Cup of the Last Supper, and even to manuscripts that narrate a completely different version of the story of Jesus. Relics that could shake the pillars of the Catholic Church, and that is why they were silenced. Investigations into the Vatican Secret Library, banned. Apocryphal texts and the censored documents reveal a network of power and concealment so deep that it seems like something out of a movie. But everything is real. Researchers who got too close to these mysterious relics were discredited, threatened, or simply disappeared. Is it possible that the Church is protecting this information to preserve the faith? Or is it hiding something that goes against everything we have been taught? If you have ever suspected that there is a hidden truth behind traditional Christianity, you are not alone. Thousands of people around the world are beginning to question, why were certain books removed from the Bible? What does the Vatican really know about the true story of Jesus? And what other secrets still remain buried, waiting to be discovered? Get ready to see images, documents, and reports that the Church never wanted them to reach you. But be careful. What you're about to hear may challenge everything you believe. And before continuing, are you really ready to discover what is hidden in the shadows of the Vatican? If you've come this far, it's because you feel, like many others, that there is something beyond what we have been told. And if all of this really is being hidden, if the Vatican really does have knowledge of sacred relics that could change the faith of millions, we can't just ignore. We need to seek, question, pray. Therefore, before we go deeper into this mystery, I want to make you a very special invitation. Leave your prayer request in the comments. Yes, right here, in this video. This is a safe space for those seeking the truth, for those who feel they need light in the midst of so much darkness. No matter your religion or belief, if you feel in your heart that you need direction, peace, or answers, write your request. Let's pray together because there are greater forces acting in this world, and some of them want to keep you away from the truth. Over the next few minutes, we'll reveal stunning details about the sacred objects that the Vatican hid and the spiritual impact it can have on our lives today. But your participation here is essential, so leave the like if this topic touches you in some way. This helps this content reach more people. And of course, if you are not yet registered, subscribe to the channel now, because here we are not afraid to investigate what many prefer to keep in the shadows. The next secret we're going to reveal is so shocking that many don't even believe it's possible. But the evidence is there. You just need to know where to look. And that's exactly what we're going to do together from now on. In recent years, excavations and secret reports by archaeologists have revealed relics that could, quite literally, change the Christian faith as we know it. Findings that point to a hidden truth, buried for centuries, ignored or purposefully silenced by the highest echelons of the Church. And, faced with such powerful discoveries, what does the Vatican do? Absolute silence. No official note, no response, no attempt even to deny or explain. These finds are not just historical fragments. They are key pieces to understanding the true legacy of Jesus Christ, the origin of Christianity, the mysteries surrounding the first centuries of the Church, and even what was really excluded from the Gospels. We are talking about holy relics, which include objects with unknown inscriptions, manuscripts with extinct languages, and physical elements associated with crucial moments in Jesus' trajectory on earth. In excavations near the Qumran region, for example, archaeologists found sealed compartments containing fragments of ancient scrolls, cult objects that date back directly to the time of Christ, and even an artifact that may be the closest we've ever come to the famous chalice of the Last Supper. All of this documented, photographed, studied, but kept away from the public eye by decision of, guess who? Yes, authorities linked to the Vatican were cited as being involved in the suppression of disclosure. Why does this happen? What is behind this great fear of revelation? Do these relics contradict ancient doctrines? Do they confirm stories that were removed from the Bible? Or do they indicate something even deeper, something that would completely shake the structures of religious power as we know it? And when independent researchers try to bring this information to light, they are discredited, called modern heretics, sensationalists, or simply disappear from the radar. Coincidence? Hard to believe. It is precisely at this point that we understand the power of Vatican's secret library, which holds, according to many scholars, more than 85 kilometers of shelves with hidden documents, banned books, maps of the ancient world, and records of celestial appearances and supernatural phenomena that have never been released to the public. Among these records, it is believed that there are reports of sacred objects found and immediately confiscated by envoys of the Holy See. Some say that the Vatican even has relics linked to the childhood of Jesus, like a supposed diary written by one of the apostles who accompanied him since he was a boy, a text that contradicts the canonical Gospels and reveals a more human and less divine nature of Christ. Could this be the reason for so much secrecy? When we touch on this type of information, it is impossible not to think about the prophecies that were hidden in the messages that certain saints and popes said they had received directly from heaven, but which were never made public. Some scholars claim that these relics have a direct relationship with the Fatima prophecies, especially with the third revelation, which to this day is shrouded in mystery and contradictions. Do you start to realize how everything is connected? The sacred objects found, the hidden relics, the apocryphal manuscripts, the censorship imposed on archaeological discoveries, and the control of information. All of this points to the same point. The Vatican is afraid of the truth. Fear that faith will be questioned, not based on rumors, but based on physical evidence, historical documents, and real testimonies. This is exactly why these secrets remain locked away, not just in the hidden shelves of the Vatican, but also in people's imaginations. Many are afraid to question, afraid to touch the sacred, afraid to discover something that takes them out of their comfort zone. But you, who are watching, now have come this far because you feel that there is something bigger behind it all. You are beginning to see that the history of faith, of the church, of humanity itself, may have been manipulated by interests that go far beyond spirituality. Imagine for a moment that all of this is true. Imagine that the Vatican has actually discovered sacred relics that rewrite the origins of the Christian faith. And imagine that these relics are being protected, hidden, perhaps even destroyed to prevent humanity from discovering what should never have been a secret. How does this make you feel? Betrayed? Curious? Thirsty for justice? That's why this video exists. To light that flame inside you. To question. To show that the truth is not just in the pages of a book, but in the forgotten details, in the documents that were burned, in the texts that the church banned, in the objects that it hid. With each new silence discovery, the gap between what we were taught and what actually happened grows. And now that you are here, with a restless heart, with your eyes open to a new level of consciousness, I want you to participate in this with me. At the end of this video, I want to read your opinion, your reflection. But first, I need to make a personal request. If this message touched your spirit, leave a comment with your prayer request. This space is more than a channel. It is a community that seeks the truth with faith and courage. Write your prayer, or just comment. Let the truth be revealed. If you feel it right, I want to know what the Vatican hides, or even, show us the light, Lord. Don't underestimate the power of these words. They not only strengthen our community, but they also fuel the reach of this truth to more and more people who need to hear it. Among the finds are supposed fragments of Christ's cross, the chalice from the Last Supper, and even manuscripts with symbols that have never been deciphered. And it is precisely there that reality begins to surpass the limits of traditional faith. When these relics began to be documented by independent scholars, respected archaeologists, and even silent members of the church structure itself, something moved behind the scenes at the Vatican. Suddenly, documents disappeared, excavations were halted, and sites deemed too dangerous for the public were cordoned off under ecclesiastical surveillance. What is in these fragments that the world cannot see? What do they threaten to reveal? Reports indicate that one of the manuscripts found had inscriptions that do not belong to any known language, but which were associated with ancient mystical languages cited in Kabbalistic and Gnostic texts. Other scholars claim that there are symbols compatible with those found in manuscripts such as Voynich's, known for its indecipherable nature. The curious thing is that, according to some confidential sources, this text made references to a body of light that would have appeared after the crucifixion, something that, if interpreted literally, could completely rewrite the understanding of the resurrection. And what about the chalice? This relic is believed to have been found hidden in an ancient underground temple in the hills near Jerusalem. The object, a dark stone cup with early Christian inscriptions, was said to have been secretly sent to the Vatican decades ago. Since then, nothing has been officially declared. No images have been released. No report was made public. But documents leaked from within the curia suggest that the cup contains a blackened resin inside, a residue that, after confidential testing, would have revealed traces of human blood with a peculiar genetic signature that did not fit into any known modern lineage. This information was never officially confirmed, and of course they wouldn't be. The truth, at this level, becomes dangerous. A non-human blood, a text that contradicts the Gospels, an object that could be the Holy Grail. All of this threatens centuries of established doctrines. The structure of institutionalized faith was built on carefully erected and maintained pillars. Revealing any piece outside of this narrative would be like pulling the thread that unravels the entire fabric. And that is why you who are here now need to understand the dimension of what is being hidden, because it's not just about holy relics. It is a battle between revelation and control, between true spirituality and forged dogmas. All of this is stored where most will never have access, in the hidden basements of the Vatican, in the lead vaults of the secret library, in the private archives that only a few cardinals are allowed to see, and even then, only in parts. There are reports that certain library sessions require the presence of 2 armed Swiss guards at all times. What would be the content of a book so dangerous that it requires armed surveillance? It's not just the content that impresses, it's the hiding pattern. Whenever something escapes, an explanation appears to divert attention. A reformed priest, a discredited archaeologist, an academic article that mysteriously disappears from scientific databases. The manipulation is sophisticated, and the public, due to fear or misinformation, remains unaware. But there is an awakening underway. People like you are starting to search, suspicious, questioning the official versions. And that's why this channel exists, not to attack faith, but to illuminate what has been hidden in its name. An undated document, but widely cited in alternative theological circles, mentions a secret meeting between members of the Roman Curia and representatives of occult orders still active in the interior of Europe. The reason? The discussion about the possible global impact of the revelation of a relic kept for more than 300 years. A stone with inscriptions that cited a forgotten Messiah, a man who would have walked with Jesus and whose teachings were erased from official scriptures. Some believe this character to be the true author of texts recently found in the caves of Nag Hammadi, documents known to openly challenge the content of the 4 Gospels. If these revelations continue to surface, everything could change. But once again, the questions are silenced before they are even asked. And yet, the clues keep emerging. A British researcher announced a few months ago that he had access to a fragment of wood, sent anonymously, with chemical evidence. Compatible with the type of tree used at the time of the crucifixion, the wood bore marks and an inscription in Latin that read, "Et veritas erit in fine," and the truth will be in the end. What does this mean? What is this end? The end of times, as some prophecies suggest, or the end of silence? And perhaps most disturbing of all is the recurring presence of hidden symbols linked to the Vatican itself. Elements that appear not only in hidden documents, but in stained glass windows, ancient coins, tapestries, and even in the corridors of the Apostolic Palace. Symbols that make reference to lost wisdom, secret orders, spiritual knowledge that never reached the common faithful. They are silent marks left by those who knew, but who could never speak. Reports indicate that representatives of the church were present at some excavations, but disappeared from the records. That's exactly what you heard. Men sent by the Vatican itself, supposedly to observe and offer spiritual support to archaeological teams, simply disappeared from official documentation. They were there, that's a fact. They were seen, photographed, and some even gave quick and discreet interviews to local channels. But after the first signs of holy relics began to emerge, fragments of wood compatible with the cross, traces of ceremonial objects used in ancient rituals, manuscripts with non-canonical inscriptions, these men disappeared, and along with them, parts of the records of the discoveries also disappeared. Archived documents, technical reports, high-resolution photographs, original samples, everything simply disappeared. The most intriguing thing is that this pattern is repeated in different parts of the world. It is not an isolated case. It's not a theory built on rumors. These are recurring situations documented by serious researchers, including atheists and neutral scientists, who claim to have been pressured, in some cases threatened, when they tried to disclose any material, involving artifacts of spiritual value, especially those that could reveal an unknown side of the story of Jesus Christ. The fear of exposing the truth is not just in words, it is in actions, in the selective erasure of evidence, in the calculated silence of those who know too much. A Spanish archaeologist, who asked not to be identified, stated that during an excavation in an ancient crypt on the outskirts of Rome, he found a reliquary with an inscription that was not part of the Catholic's tradition, but that bore the name of Yeshua, followed by an Aramaic expression that can be translated as "He who saw the invisible." A few hours after reporting the discovery, 2 representatives of the church arrived at the site, asked to preserve the spiritual integrity of the environment, and did not allow anyone access again. The contents of the reliquary were never revealed. The place was sealed. The archaeologist never spoke publicly about the matter again. What does the Vatican fear? What is it about these discoveries that so frightens religious leaders? We are not talking about frivolous speculation. We are talking about repeated patterns, a web of control that spans generations. British historian Thomas Renfield himself, author of extensive research into the Church's secret archives, stated that there are documents within the Vatican that mention specific guidelines on how to deal with archaeological finds that could destabilize public faith. One of these guidelines, according to him, determines that any object, fragment, or writing that contradicts the recognized Gospels must be immediately classified as inauthentic until further ecclesiastical evaluation. In other words, anything that challenges the official narrative will automatically be discredited before it is even studied. This raises a crucial question. What else was found and is already in storage, beyond the reach of humanity? How many manuscripts, how many sacred relics, how many testimonies of the past are locked in the underground chambers of Vatican's secret library? There are reports that not only theological documents are stored there, but also ancient maps that show the world in a different way, descriptions of civilizations before the flood, and even texts that talk about celestial beings and their interactions with humans, described in metaphorical language in the apocryphal books. One of these texts, according to sources leaked by former library employees, would contain the description of a light technology used by holy figures in ancient times, something that could represent a spirituality based not only on faith, but also on a forgotten science. It is in this context that the presence of the Vatican in the excavations becomes even more suspicious. What are they looking for? Or rather, what are they trying to hide? The Catholic Church, for centuries, was the guardian of the Christian faith, but it was also, and still is, one of the most powerful institutions on the planet. Power that extends far beyond religion, reaching politics, finance, and information control. When we look at this gigantic structure with critical eyes, we realize that preserving secrets can be more strategic than sharing truths. An object revealed at the wrong time could implode certainties, doctrines, deep-rooted beliefs, and this is something that many prefer to avoid at any cost. The Church's reaction has always been shrouded in ambiguity. When faced with discoveries that deviate from the canonical standard, the Vatican adopts silence. When pressed, it emits vague, almost poetic notes, avoiding any direct positioning. But it's behind the scenes where the real decisions are made. There, away from the spotlight, the most influential men of faith decide what can or cannot be known by you, by me, by anyone. This centralization of power over spiritual knowledge is frightening. And more than that, it is unacceptable in times like ours, where the search for truth goes beyond institutional boundaries. And that's why you, who are here now, watching and reflecting with me, have an important role. You represent a new generation of search engines, people who are no longer satisfied with ready-made explanations, who do not accept silence as an answer, who want to truly understand the mysteries of faith. This channel is made for you, for those who know that there is something hidden, not only underground, but also between the lines of history, in the shadows of our tradition, in the dark corridors of power. If you feel this, if something inside you pulses when hearing these revelations, I invite you to leave a comment. Write, "I want to know what has been buried by history," or if you prefer, comment, "The truth will emerge." And of course, as I always say, this space is also spiritual. Leave your prayer request here in the comments. Let us pray together, as a community, as seekers of truth and light. Documents from researchers, leaked images, and even old diaries confirm the existence of these relics. And we are not talking about guesses or unfounded theories, but about concrete records that, for some dark reason, never reach the general public. These files, rescued by independent scholars or revealed by internal sources linked to private libraries and historical archives, clearly show that the holy relics that the Vatican tries to keep silent exist. And more than that, they have devastating implications for the traditional narrative of Christianity. Some of these images were released by researchers who, even at risk of retaliation, decided to put the truth above fear. In one of them, you can see what appears to be a stone box, with inscriptions in ancient Hebrew and symbols that refer to traditions prior to the birth of the Church. This box would have been discovered near Jerusalem, in a cave closed for centuries. When opened, it contained fragments of aged papyrus, sealed with wax and wrapped with leather strips. One of these fragments was photographed and published anonymously in academic forums, and included, among its symbols, a direct reference to a blood that speaks after death, a quote that echoes both the texts of Hebrews and passages from the Apocryphal Gospels. Even more frightening were the contents of a diary kept by a French archaeologist named Jacques Lemoine, who participated in an excavation supervised by religious authorities. In his field notebook, Lemoine describes, in meticulous detail, the presence of a spherical artifact surrounded by silver cords and a strange blue glow. According to him, the object emitted a slight vibration and seemed to respond to human presence with a change in temperature. The artifact, of undetermined origin, was immediately removed by ecclesiastical representatives and was never seen again. Lemoine's diary disappeared after his death under mysterious circumstances, but copies of some pages had been shared with colleagues and published in restricted editions of archaeological journals in the 1990s. The Vatican has never commented on the case. These records, however hidden, were preserved by people who understood the value of truth. They knew that the world needed to know that there are material proofs of the spirituality that the Church tried to hide, and that these texts tell a very different story from that taught in the pulpits. Therefore, even in the face of threats, they continued forward, creating a silent chain of resistance, a network of truth seekers who believe that real spiritual power lies in revelation and not in secrecy. And what about the leaked images? One of the most controversial, released by a former employee of the Vatican's secret library, whose name remains protected for security reasons, shows a reliquary with the fish symbol superimposed on an inverted triangle, an ancient mark associated with early Christian sects, considered heretical by the Council of Nicaea. The object, photographed on a dark, marble table, was next to documents with 16th-century stamps and seals from the Holy See. The leak occurred through an encrypted deep web forum and was quickly taken down, but not before copies circulated among attentive researchers. This image, which seems simple at first glance, represents a significant break in the control of information. She suggests that there is something hidden inside the Vatican that could not only rewrite the history of the Church, but redefine the very identity of Christianity. And why would the Vatican keep something like that? Why hide an ancient symbol that perhaps shows a different version of Christ's message? Simple: control. The Church, like every power structure, bases its authority on the official narrative. Any element that questions this narrative not only raises doubts, but directly threatens the foundation on which this authority was built. And when we talk about faith, dogmas, centuries of spiritual and political influence, any breach can become an irreversible crack. This is the reason why the old diaries of priests and monks who had access to these objects are so important. They recorded not just what they saw, but what they felt. Many report intense mystical episodes, visions, revelations, inexplicable healings. There are reports of priests who touched certain relics and claimed to hear voices or see lights that seemed to come from another dimension. A monk from the Abbey of Monte Cassino wrote in a lost codex, recently rescued by collectors, that he held a stone that pulsed like the heart of a living man. The authenticity of the report is still being investigated by experts, but it is just one more piece in a much larger puzzle. With each fragment revealed, more questions arise. What does the Church really know about the hidden spiritual side of faith? To what extent did the apostles and early Christians have access to knowledge that was intentionally erased? And why do these documents, these relics, this evidence, continue to be hidden from us all? Perhaps this is exactly why so many believers today feel restless. There is a growing feeling that true spirituality has been replaced by a rigid structure, controlling who fears revelation. The seeker's instinct goes beyond devotion. It is a deep thirst for meaning, for clarity, for genuine contact with the divine. And the Vatican's secrets seem to be right in the middle of this conflict between what we have been told and what really is. If you've come this far, it's because this search is also alive within you, and she is not in vain. Because the closer we get to these forbidden truths, the more we realize that they have always been close, just covered up by layers and layers of silence. Now, I want you, who are following this investigation with me, to actively participate in this journey. The Vatican's silence is deafening. If it's not true, why haven't they just officially denied it? This question has echoed increasingly loudly among researchers, independent scholars, nonconformist believers, and even within discrete sectors of the Church itself. When we come across so many reports, leaked documents, unofficially catalogued manuscripts, hastily captured images before they were confiscated, and testimonies left by those who had access to these sacred relics and never spoke publicly about them again, one thing becomes clear. There is something much bigger being hidden in the shadows of the Vatican. The absence of a clear, direct and transparent answer is as revealing as the findings themselves. And we are not talking about silence out of theological prudence. It is a selective, strategic silence that applies only when the revelations touch points that are too sensitive for the ecclesiastical structure to sustain. All it takes is for some archaeological find to threaten to expose a contradiction in relation to traditional doctrine, whether about the life of Jesus, the true Gospels, or ancient occult rituals. And everything is immediately hushed up, ignored, or discredited, but never concretely refuted, never faced with solid public arguments, never officially denied. The Church, throughout its history, has always had an extremely organized apparatus to deal with what it considers to be heresy or doctrinal falsehood. He has already issued papal bulls to combat ideas, excommunicated thinkers, burned books, and even condemned scientists who contradicted official cosmology. But curiously, given these recent revelations about sacred relics, unrecognized documents, and archaeological finds that directly implicate biblical figures, the answer is silence. A silence that speaks, a silence that screams, a silence that confirms. It's as if there was a hidden guideline: not to deny, not to publicize, do not comment, so as not to instigate investigation, not responding, so that everything dies into oblivion, buried by the avalanche of information in the modern world. But this is no longer possible, because we are in an era where information flows faster than control, and more important than that, there is a growing thirst for truth. An entire generation willing to confront the mysteries of faith and dig into the dark basements of history that the Church preferred to keep closed. This omission becomes even more evident when observing the repetitive patterns of concealment, when fragments emerge that may be linked to the true site of Jesus' crucifixion, with engraved inscriptions that do not follow the traditional Roman format, but rather symbols of an esoteric Hebrew tradition. There is no official investigation. When a manuscript appears that cites a ceremony held between Mary Magdalene and the Apostles, describing a ritual for the transmission of spiritual knowledge which was never mentioned in the canonical Gospels, the Church does not send a theological team. Just shut up. And when Vatican scholars are pressed, as has occurred in rare interviews, the position is always vague, evasive. They say that there are not enough elements, that the material lacks authenticity, that care must be taken with modern interpretations. But they never say what exactly was analyzed. They never present a report. They never show the public why this content was discarded. Why not present proof that it's all false, if it really is false? Why not open the doors and show that there is nothing to fear? The problem is that there is, yes, something to fear. And this fear does not come from lies, but from the truth. Because once it was revealed that certain texts were deliberately excluded from the Bible, that certain symbols were erased from the Christian liturgy, and that certain biblical figures were portrayed in a distorted way to serve the interests of religious power, the doctrinal house of cards begins to rock. And maybe, this time, he won't be able to stand. What you need to understand is that within the structure of the Vatican, there is a gulf between what the public sees and what the guardians of the faith actually know. There are archives under lock and key that can only be accessed with the authorization of specific cardinals. There are books catalogued with internal codes, outside of public records, stored in underground chambers where not even ordinary librarians have access. There are documents that can only be read under an oath of absolute silence. Why would all this be necessary if there was nothing to hide? This stance of omission is not new. As early as medieval times, there were records of objects considered heretical being destroyed or hidden. But the difference is that now people no longer accept just obeying. They want to understand. And those who seek understanding end up finding, even if only little by little, fragments, clues, traces that point to a much richer, deeper, and more mysterious story than what we were taught in church pews. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Together. We are bringing these fragments together, connecting the dots, questioning the silence, not with the intention of destroying faith, quite the opposite, but to free it from the walls of control. Because true spirituality is not based on secrets kept by a top. It blooms in the light of revelation. And the light is coming. It is slowly breaking through the veil of the unknown. It's penetrating the walls of the sealed archives. It is illuminating what, for centuries, they tried to hide under the excuse of protecting faith. If you feel like there's something hidden, it's because there is. If you feel that the story told by the church is not complete, it is because it is not. And if you are here now following every detail of this investigation, it is because you are also part of this search. A search for a purer, truer Christianity, more connected to the essence of who Jesus really was and what he taught. Not through institutions, but through the truth revealed by time, by excavation, by the courage of those who dared to challenge the silence. Now, if you are as involved as I am in this dive, I want to make you a special invitation. Comment below, "Silence is also an answer," or "The truth can no longer be hidden." It shows that you are committed to this journey. And of course also leave your prayer request. We are forming a chain of faith and knowledge, where every word, every comment, every prayer strengthens the revelation. What would happen if the world discovered a new gospel, or what Jesus really looked like? This question is not just a theological provocation, but a real threat to the system that has sustained the institutional power of the church for centuries. Imagine for a moment that, unquestionably, a lost manuscript emerged, preserved for millennia, containing words attributed to Christ himself, but with teachings different from those canonized in the 4 traditional Gospels. A text that not only challenges the dogmas imposed by the Council of Nicaea, but that reveals a more human, more radical, perhaps even more mysterious Jesus. Someone who did not come to found a religion, but to transmit liberating spiritual knowledge, prohibited by later institutions. This new gospel, which for some researchers already exists and was found in secret excavations in the desert regions of the Middle East, would have the power to shake not only blind faith, but also the doctrinal structure of the Church as we know it. What would happen to the teachings imposed for centuries, to the rituals that were adopted as absolute truths? What would happen to the authority of the clergy, to the pillars of institutionalized Christianity, if it were suddenly revealed that Jesus himself never taught them? And more, what if, along with this lost gospel, the true appearance of Jesus Christ was discovered? An image not based on Renaissance paintings, but on concrete data, on physical records, on legitimate historical sources. There are already genetic, anthropological, and archaeological studies that indicate that the image of a blonde Jesus with blue eyes and fair skin is completely incompatible with the reality of a man born in Galilee in the 1st century. And this is not just an aesthetic issue. The idealized image of Jesus has, over the centuries, been used as an instrument of power, cultural colonization, and religious manipulation. Now imagine the cultural, spiritual, and even political impact that the revelation of a Jesus with Semitic features, dark hair, olive skin, typical features of a poor Jew from the region of ancient Palestine, would have. This would break not only religious paradigms but also ideological ones. It would raise profound debates about identity, ethnicity, historical truth, and especially about how much we have been deceived by artistic representations carefully manipulated over the centuries. The Vatican, of course, is aware of this risk, and that is why the possibility that these documents exist and that the true face of Jesus has already been reconstructed based on bone fragments, ancient tissues, and historical records is treated with the utmost secrecy. There are those who say that there is, locked in the depths of the secret archives, a piece considered sacred by some occult Christian orders, a veil with the impression of the face of a tortured man, similar to the Shroud of Turin, but even older. This object would have been hidden from the official church by defector monks in the 4th century and returned to the Vatican during the 19th century through an agreement with the Jesuit order. Witnesses claim that this face looks nothing like what we see in church paintings. He has a deep expression, eyes marked by suffering, and a countenance of wisdom that conveys something almost supernatural. It's not an iconic face. It's a real face. A face that looks back at us and demands that we confront everything we have learned. And this face, according to some sources, has already been scanned, digitized, analyzed by artificial intelligence. The results of these analyses, of course, were never made public. Now stop and reflect with me. Why hide a face? Why hide a gospel? Why deny humanity the right to know the essence of the one who, according to the Christian faith itself, came to bring light? The answer is not in spirituality. It is in control. Because the truth frees, but freedom is dangerous for those who live in fear. A new gospel would break the shackles of blind obedience. A real image of Jesus would break the manufactured idolatry. The combination of these two truths would be an earthquake within the church. And perhaps that's why, throughout history, so many texts were banned, so many books burned, so many monks silenced. The Gospel of Thomas, that of Mary Magdalene, that of Jude, all considered apocryphal, even though they contain passages that align with profound spiritual teachings. Why? Because these texts do not reinforce clerical authority. They point to a direct, living spirituality, accessible to everyone, without the need for intermediaries. A faith that is based on knowledge and not just submission. But even in the face of all this effort to hide, the truth always finds a way to emerge. Fragments resurface. Forgotten scrolls are found. Oral traditions connect with archaeological finds. And you, who are here now, are proof that this search is still alive. You are part of this awakening. Part of those who no longer accept dogmas without question. Part of those who want to see with their own eyes, hear with their own ears, and feel with their own spirit what has been hidden for so long. Some scholars associate these discoveries with the fulfillment of forgotten prophecies, prophecies that for centuries were treated as myths, legends, or even heresies. But now, in light of recent evidence, they are beginning to make disturbing sense. We are not talking about the popular and repeated prophecies, the ones that appear in spiritual self-help books or in carefully edited homilies. We are talking about ancient, rare, hidden texts, prophecies found in apocryphal manuscripts, in fragments that survived library burnings and religious persecution, and which today circulate silently among independent scholars and dissident theologians. Prophecies that describe, with enigmatic words, the time in which the hidden truth of Christianity would come to light, breaking through the walls of the Vatican and rekindling the spiritual spark amid institutionalized darkness. There are direct mentions, in some of these texts, of the appearance of objects of light that would be found by impure hands, but interpreted by pure eyes. In other passages, we find descriptions of sealed books that would be unearthed in the time of the end, revealing what the holy men hid from the little ones. What were these books? What could these light objects be? Many associate these visions with the emergence of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Gospel of Thomas, that of Mary, Magdalene, and other texts that have not yet been officially released by the Vatican, but which are already circulating in versions translated by courageous experts. An excerpt from an esoteric manuscript, attributed to an ancient 3rd century hermit known as Abba Nathaniel, speaks clearly of the discovery of a relic from within the stone that would contain the last name of the Son of Man, a spiritual identity that, according to the text, was hidden so that it would not be worshipped as an idol. This prophecy, until recently considered irrelevant, resurfaced after the discovery of an artifact found in the Mount of Olives region, wrapped in fabric with silver threads, containing inscriptions similar to those described in Nathaniel's manuscript. The relic was immediately collected by religious authorities and was never presented to the public again. Coincidence? Other researchers suggest that forgotten prophecies are not only in these documents, but also in symbols hidden in monuments, in ancient works of art, on the walls of chapels and cathedrals. Symbols that, according to them, had been speaking for centuries, but no one dared to listen. An example are the patterns carved on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which, according to experts in religious symbolism, feature geometric figures and numerical combinations that refer to cycles of prophetic revelations, as if Michelangelo, when painting that masterpiece, knew something that he could not openly declare, something that was revealed to him by internal sources, perhaps linked to the mystical orders that operate within the church itself, in the underground of official decisions. There is also the theory that certain Marian apparitions, such as those at La Salette, Lourdes, and Fatima, were actually direct responses to these forgotten prophecies. There are those who say that the true contents of the messages transmitted in these celestial encounters were never completely disclosed, and that the third, secret of Fatima, for example, was not about war or persecution of the church, as they said, but rather about the fall of a power-dominated religious structure and the revelation that the true teaching of Christ had been distorted, erased, and buried under tons of theological bureaucracy. Some excerpts attributed to Malachi's prophecy, often remembered for predicting the last popes, also mention a great revelation in the end times, something that would divide believers, that would separate those who seek the light of truth from those who remain in the shadows of tradition. The curious thing is that scholars from different backgrounds, Catholic, Orthodox, esoteric, secular historians, have reached the same conclusion, even starting from different premises. There is a convergence of signs, discoveries, and ancient warnings pointing to a decisive moment in the spiritual history of humanity. And the Vatican knows this. You know why you keep these documents. Because you know these predictions. Because you have access to the oldest copies, the purest codices, the revelations that have never been translated for the general public. Many believe that inside the secret library, there is a room where only prophecies are kept. Reports of visions, apparitions, records of mystical experiences of saints who were not canonized. A prophetic archive of humanity that has never been revealed. Perhaps because, if it were, It would expose what the Church itself refused to accept, that the truth cannot be controlled eternally, and that she always finds a way to resurface. Now imagine that all of this is actually starting to happen, that we are living in this time of revelation, that every fragment found, every document leaked, every object removed from oblivion is fulfilling one of these forgotten prophecies. This would explain the rush with which some relics are collected, the speed with which certain research is stifled, and the increase in the number of people around the world who are waking up spiritually, questioning, looking beyond dogma, feeling that there is something wrong with the official story. This is exactly why this search cannot stop, because perhaps, by putting these pieces together, we are touching the prophecy with our own hands. Perhaps we are living in the moment that the ancient seers glimpsed in their states of spiritual ecstasy, the moment when what was hidden would be revealed, the moment when the humble would understand more than the priests, the moment when the Vatican's secrets, kept for centuries, would begin to be exposed not through physical confrontations, but through the faith of those who are no longer afraid to know. If all of this resonates with you, if you feel like you are part of this generation that is breaking the cycle of silence, comment here on this video. The prophecies are being fulfilled, or I want to see what they hid for centuries. And don't forget to leave your prayer request, because together we form a chain that unites hidden knowledge with revealed faith. Do you believe that the Church hides these relics? Comment here what you think is being hidden from us. Because if we are honest, everything points to a truth that can no longer be ignored. There is an evident, systematic, and silent effort to keep certain sacred objects, ancient manuscripts, and spiritual evidence out of the public eye. And when we talk about the Church, we are not referring to faith itself, which is pure, transformative, and necessary, but rather to the institution, to the earthly power that has taken upon itself the right to decide what can or cannot be revealed. Several discoveries over the past few decades have been shrouded in mystery and hushed up with impressive speed. It's almost as if there is a constant vigilance over everything that comes close to the truth that cannot be spoken. Researchers who have dedicated their lives to studying apocryphal manuscripts or searching for physical traces of biblical events report obstacles that go beyond the ordinary: disappearance of documents, inexplicable refusals of access to archives, sudden losses of sponsorship, and even veiled threats. It is an organized resistance, disguised as protection of the faith, but which in fact hides the fear that the revelation of these relics would profoundly shake the established narrative. Many of these finds, such as parchments that speak about Jesus' secret teachings, objects that would have been used in original rituals of the first Christian community, and even letters between apostles that never made it into the New Testament, have the power to completely change the way faith is understood. Some texts suggest, for example, that the role of Mary Magdalene in the life and mission of Jesus was much greater than has been taught. Others indicate that certain miracles attributed to Christ may have been understood symbolically rather than literally. And this, of course, for an institution that has built its power on rigid interpretations, is absolutely unacceptable. If these relics come to light, what is at stake is not just a change in spiritual perspective. It is the crumbling of centuries of unchallenged authority, the breaking of a monopoly on the interpretation of Scripture, and the beginning of a new time in which faith will be guided by the light of knowledge and not by the fear of punishment. That's why the secret files remain locked. This is why many documents catalogued centuries ago have never been translated or made public. Because there is, yes, something being hidden, and you feel it. If you've made it this far in this video, it's because this restlessness already lives within you. And now I want to know, what do you feel has been hidden from humanity? What is the secret that, if revealed today, could change everything? Comment here with the phrase, "They hid something we need to know," or write, "The time has come for the truth to emerge." And, as always, also leave your prayer request, because this community is not only about search and discovery, but also about faith, acceptance, and spiritual strength. If you found this shocking, wait until you see the video about the forbidden manuscript that could reveal the exact day of the end of the world. This statement may sound absurd to many, even conspiratorial to others, but within the Vatican's secret archives, there are reports, mentions, and documents that suggest the existence of an extremely ancient prophetic text, never revealed to the public, kept under maximum surveillance because it contains predictions so specific that they could cause global panic if they came to light. We are not talking about open interpretations like those in the Revelation of John or enigmatic passages from the Old Testament prophets. We are talking about a manuscript that, according to internal sources and confidential leaks, brings dates, names, events, and even a celestial countdown. Some scholars who have had partial access to these fragments, under rare and restricted authorization, report that the text is written in a composite language, with traces of archaic Hebrew, Koine Greek, and an unidentified dialect reminiscent of the Nag Hammadi codices. In it, the author describes a series of astronomical phenomena and earthly signs that should be observed to recognize the beginning of the last era. These signs, according to cross-references made by alternative theologians and scientists, coincide with current events, such as specific eclipses, extreme weather patterns, social unrest, and the global rise of spiritual crises. Coincidence, or something that was predicted and is unfolding before our eyes? The most frightening thing is that this manuscript, which many call the hidden Gospel of Revelation, would have been kept out of official councils precisely because it directly confronted traditional doctrine. He points to a spiritual timeline, where each cycle of humanity is linked to a door of understanding that opens every 2,000 years. According to reading this text, the last cycle started recently and will bring a revelation so intense that it will make the mountains tremble and the eyes of the blind open. The metaphor may seem poetic, but the way global events are intensifying raises a legitimate suspicion. Does this manuscript really have something to say about our time? Several dissident priests and monks have already mentioned this text in veiled interviews and in coded writings. One of them, a refugee in Eastern Europe after leaving the Jesuit order, stated that the manuscript prophesies the fall of a great stone tower with many eyes and no soul, a phrase that many linked to the spiritual collapse of traditional religious institutions. He also mentioned that the text makes reference to 7 codes kept within the walls of the Vatican, each representing a part of the truth, and which, when united, would form a complete vision of the destiny of humanity. These codes would be parts of scattered documents, protected at different levels of the Vatican hierarchy, and, according to him, some of these codes have already been leaked without the Vatican itself noticing. Another unofficial source, linked to a group of translators who work with old documents from the secret library, revealed that there is a restricted session called Custodia Finalis, a collection that only contains texts with predictions considered too dangerous for the public. This group claims to have seen mention of a manuscript of the final cycle, the contents of which would be protected under the direct custody of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the former Holy Office. This document would contain instructions left by an unknown prophet, but close to the roots of primitive Christianity, and whose words would be heard at the end of time, even if whispered under stones. Imagine what this would mean if it were revealed to the world. Talar, chaos, the awakening, the total restructuring of religious beliefs. Perhaps that is why, over the years, the Vatican has kept this content completely secret, dealing with it as if it were a bomb about to explode. And maybe that's exactly why you're here. Because something inside you feels that we are not living in any moment. We are living at a turning point, a transition, a time when ancient prophecies are being fulfilled not as metaphors, but as realities. If this manuscript truly holds the keys to understanding the end time, then we have a responsibility to search, to connect the signs, to question what has been silenced for so long. And that's why, in the next video, we're going to dive into this topic even more deeply. We will trace the origins of the manuscript, expose the excerpts that have already come to light, analyze the cosmic patterns mentioned, and understand why the Vatican is so afraid that this content will be known. If you've stayed with me this far, it's because this message touched something deep inside you. And that means you are part of a rare group, people who are truly awakening, who are not afraid of the truth, and who want to go beyond what they have been told. So, if you made it to the end of this video, already leave your like. This shows YouTube that this content is relevant and helps more searchers like you find this channel. And now, I want to make you a special invitation. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because in the next videos we will continue this investigation, and what comes next is even deeper, more controversial, and more revealing. You won't want to miss it. And comment below, "I seek the truth, no matter what the cost." This phrase will show that you are part of this chain of faith, knowledge, and revelation. And if you can, share this video with someone who needs to hear these truths. And now, click on the next video that is appearing on the screen. There, we will explore a forbidden manuscript that may contain the Vatican's best-kept secret to date. I'll wait for you.